The first frost of October came quietly to Boston, the way most things that matter come quietly, without announcement, without ceremony, just a cold edge slipping under doors and into lungs before anyone thought to close the windows. Ethan Cole had been awake since 4:30, not because Lily had cried out in the night, though that happened sometimes, and he had learned to sleep with one ear open, one arm already halfway toward the hallway, before consciousness fully caught up. No, tonight she had slept fine. He was the one who couldn't stay under. He'd lain in the dark, staring at the watermark on the ceiling that looked faintly like the state of Florida if you tilted your head, calculating. Rent was the 12th, the electric bill was due the 15th, Lily's follow-up with the pediatric cardiologist was the 18th, and he had $46 in checking and roughly 11 days until his next paycheck cleared. He got up, made coffee in the dark, cut her sandwich into the triangle shape she liked, not squares, because she had explained to him with devastating 4-year-old certainty that triangles tasted better, and he had never once challenged this, not when she was 4, not now at 6. Some truths were not worth testing. He dressed her in her yellow coat while she was still half asleep, tugging her arms through the sleeves while she blinked up at him with her mother's eyes. That was the hardest part. Not the bills, not the exhaustion, not the particular loneliness of eating dinner alone at a table set for 2. It was those eyes, wide and dark and trusting in a way that simultaneously made him want to be everything she needed and terrified him that he might not be. "Daddy, your tie is crooked," she said. "You're crooked," he said. She laughed. This was their routine. He dropped her at Jefferson Elementary at 7:15, watched her push through the heavy double doors without looking back. 6 years old and already so certain of herself in doorways, and then stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than was necessary, the cold working into the collar of his jacket. He took the T downtown. Callaway Partners occupied the 14th through 17th floors of a glass tower on Congress Street, and Ethan had worked there for 11 months as a mid-level analyst in operational logistics. His job was to make other people's inefficiencies legible, to trace the places where process and reality had quietly divorced, and write careful, detailed reports about the gap. He was good at it. He was good at it in the same way he was good at everything since Rachel died, steadily, without celebration, with the specific grim competence of a man who has learned that the only real luxury is forward motion. He liked the work. He did not love it. There was a distinction. The meeting that morning was mandatory and company-wide. A reorganization briefing led by Victoria Carter, who had been CEO for 14 months and whom Ethan had seen in person exactly 4 times, always at a remove, always as a silhouette against a glass wall, or a presence moving through the lobby while assistants pivoted in her wake. She was the kind of person rooms rearrange themselves around. He had noticed this without meaning to. The conference room on 17 was already crowded when he arrived. He found a seat along the back wall, between a program manager named Dennis, who smelled of coffee and anxiety, and a junior analyst whose name Ethan could never retain. The room had the particular low-grade dread of a meeting in which no one knows whether they will still have their job when it ends. Victoria Carter walked in at 9:02. She wore charcoal. Her hair was pulled back with the kind of geometric precision that made it look effortless, and was not. She moved to the head of the table without greeting anyone, and opened her laptop and began speaking in a voice that was low and absolutely even, and allowed no interruption. She was presenting restructuring figures. She was talking about optimization. She was using the word alignment with a frequency that made the back of Ethan's neck tighten. He had not slept enough. He had eaten half a piece of toast standing over the sink at 5:15. He had been in this building for 2 hours already. And before that, he had been running on 4 hours and a caffeine headache. And somewhere in the middle of Victoria Carter's second slide about departmental synergy, the exhaustion that had been patient and strategic all morning simply ran out of patience. He meant to say nothing. He was not sure he even opened his mouth with intention. It was the kind of thing that happens in the space between one thought and the next, The way you touch a hot stove before the message of pain has finished traveling from fingertip to brain. Marry me, Miss Carter. The words came out low, not loud, not even projected, but in a room that had gone quiet at exactly the wrong moment. They landed with the clarity of a glass breaking on stone. The silence that followed was the specific kind that has weight. 26 people suddenly remembering how to look at their laptops. Dennis beside him making a noise in his throat that was somewhere between a cough and a retreat. Someone he couldn't see who actually moved their chair an inch backward, as if distance might protect them from the blast radius. Ethan felt his face go the particular blank of a man who has just watched himself do something catastrophic and is still processing whether it really happened. It had happened. He could hear the echo of his own voice. Victoria Carter stopped. She turned from the projection screen. She looked at him. He had been wrong about her eyes from a distance. Up close, at this precise and terrible moment, they were not cold. They were something more unsettling than cold. They were still. The way very deep water is still, giving nothing away about what moved underneath. For 3 seconds he counted them. They were some of the longer seconds of his life. She held his gaze. Then his phone buzzed against his thigh. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession, the pattern that meant it wasn't a notification. It was a call. And then a second call, and then a third, and the number on the screen was Jefferson Elementary's main office. Something in his chest turned over. He looked up. "I'm sorry," he said, and he did not mean the joke this time. "I have to. It's my daughter's school." He didn't wait to see her face. He was in the elevator before he'd fully decided to move. Later, he couldn't reconstruct the exact sequence, pocketing the phone, pushing back the chair, the glances of 26 people tracking him toward the door. He only remembered that by the time he hit the lobby, the world had compressed to the width of a single thought. Lily, the receptionist at Jefferson Elementary, had a steady, practiced voice that he recognized, even through the phone's static, as the voice of someone who has delivered frightening news many times and knows that the kindest thing is not to soften it but to make it clear. "Mr. Cole." Lily fainted during morning assembly. "The nurse has her. She's conscious and she's talking, but we need you to come in. We've called Dr. Harmon's office and they'd like her seen this afternoon." He was outside on Congress Street. October air hit him full in the face. The sky above the buildings was a white-gray smear, and the ginkgo trees along the sidewalk had gone gold overnight, their leaves dropping in slow spirals in the cold air, landing against the pavement with a softness that felt wrong for a morning like this. He stood on the sidewalk and did the involuntary calculation of a man who has been doing it for 2 years. The school was 20 minutes by tea, maybe 15 if he ran to the station now, but he had a meeting he'd just walked out of, a job that was almost certainly already burning down behind him, and Lily's cardiologist visit wasn't until next week, except now it apparently was today. He didn't have a car. His car had needed a new alternator in August, and he hadn't replaced it yet. He was checking his phone for ride shares, the math of what it would cost versus what he had when he heard footsteps on the stone steps behind him. "Cole." He turned. Victoria Carter was standing at the top of the building steps, her coat on, her bag over one shoulder. Her assistant was hovering 5 feet behind her with the expression of someone who has been told to stay back. "Where is the school?" she said. He blinked. "Jefferson Elementary, off Tremont." She came down the steps. She passed him and walked without slowing toward the parking structure across the street. After 3 steps, she said, without turning, "Are you coming?" He came. The car was a dark gray Audi, understated in the way that very expensive things often are. And she drove it herself, no driver, no assistant, no ceremony. She pulled into traffic on Congress Street with the practiced ease of someone who'd navigated this city for years, and Ethan sat in the passenger seat, feeling the strange dislocation of a man who is inside a situation that has no previous version of itself to refer to. He should say something, apologize again, explain the comment, though explaining it felt somehow worse than leaving it untouched, the way picking at a wound delays the healing. The thing I said in the meeting, he started. Don't, she said, not unkindly. Simply, he didn't. She drove. The streets outside were quiet in the way of mid-morning Boston, the rush hour's violence already absorbed into office buildings and classrooms, and all the ordinary containers of Tuesday. Ginkgo leaves pressed flat against the windshield at a red light, brilliant yellow against gray, and she hit the wipers once to clear them without comment. How old? She said after a while. 6, he said. She nodded. Watched the light. What happened? He explained what the school had told him. Lily had fainted at assembly. The school nurse thought it was low blood sugar. She had a history of skipping breakfast when she was anxious, and she'd been nervous about a presentation, but Lily also had a mild congenital heart irregularity that the cardiologist monitored with 6-month checkups, and the combination meant they wanted her seen today rather than waiting. Victoria said nothing for a moment. Then, is it serious? The heart condition? They've called it benign for now, Ethan said. Her last echo looked good. And she doesn't always tell me when something feels wrong because she doesn't want me to worry. The light changed. She pulled forward. How long has she been doing that? Victoria asked. Not telling you. He considered this honestly, since her mother died. She decided I had enough. Silence filled the car in a different way after that, not the silence of avoidance, but something more like the silence of recognition of two people who have both been in proximity to a loss large enough to reorganize a life and are choosing not to cheapen it with immediate words. Victoria Carter turned onto Tremont and said nothing. For the first time in 11 months of working at Callaway Partners, Ethan Cole was not afraid of her. Jefferson Elementary was a red brick building set back from the street behind a chain-link fence and a row of sugar maples that had turned the particular burning red of October. Victoria parked along the curb with the authority of someone who never questions whether she is allowed to be somewhere, and they walked through the main entrance, past the laminated visitor badges and the hallway art projects, into the nurse's office at the end of the first-floor corridor. Lily was sitting up on the examination cot. She looked small. She always looked small. She had never been a large child, had always run a little thin, a little light, like a bird that might lift off your hand, but today she looked smaller than her actual size, and her face when she saw him had the expression he'd been dreading and had also been hoping for. Relief, so immediate and so complete that it was visible from across the room. Daddy. He crossed the room and held her for a long time. She was warm. Not feverish warm in the way of a child who has been frightened and is now beginning to release the fear. Her heartbeat was steady under his hand. He did not cry. He had learned, 2 years ago, how to file the urgency of emotion in the body, how to receive it and acknowledge it, and set it aside until there was time, because there was always time, and also there was never time, and the distinction was something you learned to negotiate. He pulled back and looked at her face. How are you feeling? My head hurt, she said, but it's better now. The nurse gave me orange juice. Good. I didn't throw up. Also good. Sheila's eyes looked past him, and her expression shifted, not alarmed, but attentive, the way children are attentive when something unexpected appears in their immediate geography. Who is that? She said. He turned. Victoria was standing in the doorway. She had not entered the room, which he understood instinctively was a deliberate choice. She had positioned herself at the threshold, out of the way, not imposing. She was looking at Lily with an expression he had not seen on her face in the 14 months she'd occupied the 14th through 17th floors of his professional life. Something alert and uncertain and very careful. This is Miss Carter, Ethan said. She drove us here. Oh, said Lily. She studied Victoria with the frank, unhurried assessment of a 6-year-old, taking inventory of her coat, her posture, her face. Then she said, Thank you. You're welcome, Victoria said. Are you Daddy's friend? The pause before Victoria answered was less than a second. I work with your dad, she said. Lily seemed to accept this, though the look on her face suggested she was filing it for later consideration. The school nurse, a brisk woman named Harriet, who had clearly worked with children long enough to be pleasantly unsentimental about most things, explained to Ethan that Lily's blood pressure had normalized after the juice and the rest. But given the cardiac history, Dr. Harmon's office had agreed to a same-day appointment at 2. She handed him a printed summary of the incident. Victoria spoke to the nurse briefly and quietly. He didn't hear everything. He was helping Lily button her coat, untangling her scarf from the sleeve where it always got caught. But when he looked up, Harriet was nodding and making a note, and something had been arranged. He found out 20 minutes later, in the car, that Victoria had called ahead to Dr. Harmon's office, and that the 2 o'clock had become a 12:30. He looked at her sideways. She was watching the road. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. Dr. Harmon's office was on the 5th floor of a building near Brigham and Women's, and the news was ultimately manageable. The echo looked essentially unchanged from 6 months prior. The fainting was more likely dehydration and low blood sugar than a cardiac event. They adjusted Lily's morning routine recommendations, added an iron supplement, scheduled the next follow-up for 6 weeks out. Dr. Harmon shook Ethan's hand at the door and said she wasn't worried, and she said it with the particular weight of someone who knows how to mean it. Lily fell asleep in the car on the way back, curled against the door with her yellow coat pulled up around her ears, her small chest rising and falling with the uncomplicated rhythm of a child who has had a large morning and is simply done with it. Ethan looked at her and felt the particular compound of relief and exhaustion that had become, over 2 years, the dominant weather of his interior life. "Come up," Victoria said. She had been driving, and now she was pulling into the parking structure of a building he didn't immediately recognize. Taller, quieter, a neighborhood further west. "Both of you. She needs to sleep somewhere proper. We can get a cab. The cab will wake her." Her voice had the pragmatic flatness of someone who is not making an offer, exactly, but is also not accustomed to being argued with. Then, more quietly, "And you haven't eaten since whenever?" He hadn't. He hadn't eaten since the half slice of toast at 5:15, and his body, now that someone had mentioned it, submitted this information with some urgency. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." The apartment, he learned, without being told, that it was a penthouse. The elevator required a key for the top floor, was the opposite of everything its owner projected in a professional context. It was not cold. It was not austere. It had high ceilings and south-facing windows that let in the afternoon light at the angle that makes ordinary rooms feel like paintings, and there were books stacked on every flat surface with the particular casualness that means they are being actively read, not displayed. The kitchen was real used, the kind of kitchen with a good knife and a worn cutting board and a coffee maker that had been through several years of consistent mornings. Ethan laid Lily on the couch with her coat as a blanket. She didn't stir. He stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Victoria open the refrigerator with the focused attention of someone taking inventory. "Eggs," she said. "There's bread." "I can do it," he said. She looked at him. "Sit down, Cole." He sat at the kitchen island. She made eggs, scrambled with pepper and a little cheese, and she made them without fuss or ceremony, and she set a plate in front of him along with a glass of water and went back to make her own without waiting for him to say thank you. He ate. The food was simple and it was warm, and he had not eaten since before sunrise, and he felt, somewhere in the physical fact of it, the specific gratitude that belongs to moments when a very basic need is simply met by another human being. Outside the south-facing windows, the city was beginning its afternoon shift. The light was at that low October angle, making the buildings gold. Somewhere below, 2 pigeons negotiated a windowsill. "I'll understand if there are consequences at work," Ethan said. "For this morning." Victoria sat across from him with her own plate. "I know you will. I didn't mean the comment. I hadn't slept, and it just—" "I know," she said. "You don't need to explain it." He looked at her. "Did it bother you?" She was quiet for a moment. She looked out the window rather than at him. "People say foolish things when they're exhausted," she said. I've said a few myself. He couldn't imagine it. Exactly. But he believed her. Lily woke up at 3:30, soft and rumpled and disoriented, and came to stand in the kitchen doorway holding her coat against her chest like a stuffed animal. "Where are we?" she said. "Miss Carter's apartment," Ethan said. "You fell asleep." Lily absorbed this information and then looked at Victoria, who was sitting at the end of the island with a cup of tea and some papers she'd been working through. "Do you have any crackers?" Lily said. Ethan started. "I think I do," Victoria said. She opened the cabinet above the microwave and found a box of water crackers and set them on the island. Lily climbed up onto a stool with the particular focused athleticism of a 6-year-old approaching furniture and helped herself to a handful and began eating with great seriousness. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at the papers. "Work," Victoria said. "What kind of work?" "Reports." Lily considered this. "My dad writes reports too," she said. "He does it after dinner when I'm asleep. I saw him once when I got up for water." Victoria glanced at Ethan. There was something in the look that he couldn't categorize. "He works hard," Lily continued. She had the information-sharing mode of a child who has learned that adults pay better attention when you offer them something concrete. "He's tired a lot, but he doesn't say that." "Lily," Ethan said. "What?" "It's true." Victoria looked at him steadily. She said nothing, but the quality of her attention had shifted, or perhaps he was only now noticing a quality that had been there for some time. The afternoon went on around them in the way that afternoons do when the pressure of the day has finally broken, and what's left is simply time. Lily found a set of markers in a kitchen drawer. "Are these for drawing?" she asked, and Victoria said, "I don't see why not," and settled at the coffee table with a piece of printer paper. Ethan helped with the dishes without being asked. Victoria went back to her papers, but held them in a looser way, like someone doing two things at once and not minding. The light through the windows moved across the floor in a slow diagonal. He washed the 2 plates and the glasses and stood at the sink, looking out at the city below, and thought about how strange rooms become when you are permitted to simply exist in them. He had been in Victoria Carter's professional orbit for 11 months, and in all that time the sum total of his impressions of her had been accurate but incomplete, the way a photograph of a country is accurate and incomplete. He had seen the surface and correctly identified its qualities. Formidable, precise, unmoved by pressure. He had not seen what those qualities were built over. You build that kind of exterior over something, he thought. Over something that needs protecting. Lily had moved on from drawing to asking Victoria detailed questions about the view from the window. Which building was that one? Did she know anyone who lived there? Why was the river that color? And Victoria was answering each question with a seriousness that treated them as worthy inquiries, which they were, because most of Lily's questions were if you took them seriously. He dried the dishes and watched the two of them at the window and felt the particular displaced feeling of an emotion that hasn't decided what to call itself yet. At some point, Lily brought her drawing to Victoria and set it on the edge of the island without a word. It was 3 figures, rendered in the frank and confident style of a 6-year-old who is not worried about technique. 2 taller ones, 1 smaller, all holding hands. Below them, Lily had written in her careful, laborious printing, U.S. Victoria looked at the drawing for a long time. She looked at it the way people look at things that have arrived before they were ready for them, not unwilling to receive it, just needing a moment to make room. "Thank you," she said. Her voice had something in it that she didn't try to conceal, which surprised him more than anything else that day. It was past 6 by the time Lily fell asleep again, this time in the guest room that Victoria had made up, with quiet efficiency, fresh sheets, a glass of water on the nightstand, the curtain pulled against the streetlights. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing evened out, then came back to the kitchen to find Victoria standing at the window with a glass of wine, looking out at the city's early dark. "You don't have to stay," she said, without turning. "I can call you a car." "I know," he said. "Can I have some of that?" She got a second glass. They sat in the living room, not close, not far, in the way of two people who are navigating something that doesn't have established rules yet. The city outside was doing its nighttime arrangements, the lights coming on in patterns that meant lives in progress, the particular warmth of other people's windows. "She looks like her mother," Ethan said. He wasn't sure why he said it then. Sometimes things surfaced on their own schedule. Victoria didn't deflect. "What was she like, Rachel?" He turned the glass in his hands. She was impatient, in a good way. She had this thing where she couldn't wait to get to the next thing. Always. Always moving. It used to exhaust me, and I'd give anything to watch it again. He stopped. She died when Lily was 4. 18 months of something that should have been treatable, and then, one morning, it just wasn't. The room held it. "I don't talk about her enough," he said. "I know I should, for Lily's sake, but I'm still learning how to say it out loud without it pulling the floor out." "That takes a long time," Victoria said. He looked at her, longer than people think it should. The word came with a weight he hadn't expected. He waited. She looked at the window. "I had a brother," she said. "Younger. Robert. He died 8 years ago, a car accident, very ordinary, December ice on a highway in Connecticut." She paused. "Everyone kept telling me I'd feel better by spring, as if grief worked like seasonal produce." "It doesn't," he said. "No," she said. "It doesn't." They were quiet for a while. Outside, somewhere below, a car horn rose and faded into the ordinary noise of the city. "You seem like you're alone," Ethan said carefully. "Here, I mean." "Evidence of other people," she said. She almost smiled. "It's accurate. I didn't mean—" "You did, and you're right." She looked at her glass. "I've organized my life around the things I can manage. The company, the work, the outcomes. People are people, don't follow process documentation." Another, almost, smile. "They're unpredictable. Terrible design flaw," he said. This time she did smile just briefly, just enough to see it was real. "My sentiments exactly." He looked at her. She was looking at the window again, and in the apartment light, without the architecture of her professional context, the presentations, the glass walls, the careful distance of 17 floors, she looked like a person who had been alone for a very specific kind of long time. Not lonely in a dramatic way, just unaccompanied, in a way that had started to feel like personality rather than circumstance. He recognized it because he'd been watching it in his own mirror. Ethan came back the next Saturday. He told himself it was to return Victoria's parking garage pass, which she'd given him so he could bring Lily's things to the car. He also brought a container of the lemon blueberry muffins that Lily had insisted on making Thursday afternoon, for Miss Carter. She doesn't have anyone to bake for her, and Lily came with him, because she had declared with the unassailable certainty of a 6-year-old that this was happening. Victoria opened the door in a sweater rather than charcoal, which felt like the most radical departure of his recent experience, and she looked at the muffin container and then at Lily standing in the hallway with the expression of a person delivering something important. "We made them," Lily said. "I did the lemon part." Victoria stood aside. "Come in." They stayed 4 hours. Ethan noticed, as the morning moved through the apartment, that Victoria had rearranged the crackers from the high cabinet to a lower one. He didn't mention it. Lily found them without looking and took this as entirely unremarkable, which was, perhaps, the whole point. He fixed the kitchen drawer that stuck the one with the markers. He found the right screwdriver in a kitchen junk drawer that was fascinating in its reveal of a life conducted with impeccable external precision but containing, like everyone's junk drawer, all the things that didn't have official homes. Batteries from some previous decade. A takeout menu from a restaurant that might no longer exist. A birthday card he deliberately did not read. She brought him coffee while he crouched on the kitchen floor with the drawer in pieces. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said, and looked up at her. "But you already know what I'm going to say next." "I know," she said, mimicking his cadence with a very dry precision. He laughed. It came out of him with a naturalness that surprised him. the kind of laugh that you feel in your chest before you hear it. For just a second, like a person who had received something she'd forgotten to expect, Lily, from the living room, said, "Daddy, can we come back next weekend?" He looked at Victoria. "If Miss Carter," he started. "Yes," Victoria said. Not to him. To Lily. The word landed simple and clean. In the afternoon, while Lily napped in the guest room that had quietly become, in the logic of the weekend, Lily's room, Victoria made tea and Ethan sat at the kitchen island, and they talked about nothing in particular. The tea's reliability, a book she'd been reading. Whether ginkgo trees smelled as bad as advertised, she said yes, definitively. He said he'd built a tolerance. "What are you reading?" he asked. She retrieved it from the coffee table, a novel, mid-century. A writer he'd heard of but not read. "It's about a man who inherits a house he doesn't want and can't bring himself to sell," she said. "It takes him 400 pages to figure out that the reason he can't sell it is because it's the first place he's ever slept well." He looked at her. "It's better than it sounds," she said. "It sounds good," he said. She considered him. "You can borrow it when I'm done." It was such a small thing. The unremarkable domesticity of passing a book, and yet it sat with him. The assumption built into it that there would be a "when I'm done," that he would be available to receive it, that this was an arrangement they were both operating inside without having named it as such. He thought about the drawer he'd fixed, the crackers at a reachable height. The name on the guest room door that he was beginning to understand had been put there not as a declaration but as a quiet, unilateral act of hope, a flag planted before the territory had been negotiated. He was doing the same thing, he realized. He had been doing it for weeks. The city light came through the south windows. The leaves outside had moved from gold to rust. When he left with Lily asleep against his shoulder, his hand on the door, he turned back once. Victoria was standing in the kitchen. She lifted her hand, not a wave. Exactly. Something quieter. An acknowledgement. A marking of the moment. He lifted his in return. He walked to the elevator with Lily's weight warm against his collarbone and thought, something is changing. Not in a frightening way. In the way of a room gradually warming, you don't notice each degree individually. But then, at some point, the cold is simply gone. November came without ceremony, the way months do in Boston, a slight further darkening. The trees giving up their last color, the sky lowering. The talk at Callaway Partners had been, as Ethan had known it would be, immediate and not particularly subtle. He heard fragments. "Did you see him walk out of the Carter meeting? Is he still employed? What was that about?" People arranged information about things they don't understand into the shapes they already know, and the shapes they already knew for this particular story were limited. He let them talk. What he could not entirely manage was the version of the story in his own head. He had started to look for her in meetings, not because she was usually in meetings, she was not. She governed from a remove, but because when she was, he was aware of it with an acuity that was difficult to assign a professional cause. He was aware of the particular way she annotated decisions, in real time, with the precision of someone who had already run the calculation before entering the room. He was aware of her voice at the back of a large briefing, asking a question that restructured the frame of everything preceding it. He was aware that she sometimes, briefly, looked in his direction. He did not trust himself to interpret what any of this meant. On a Tuesday morning in the third week of November, she walked past his workstation and dropped a folder on his desk without slowing. "I'd like your analysis of the meridian distribution inefficiency by Friday," she said. "Your framework from the Q3 summary was the closest anyone's gotten." She didn't stop walking. His manager, who had witnessed this, turned slowly from his monitor to look at Ethan with an expression compounded of equal parts confusion and professional alarm. When did she read your Q3 summary?" "I have no idea," Ethan said, which was true. He thought about it for the rest of the day. That evening, after Lily was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with the Meridian folder and a cup of coffee and worked through it methodically, and was aware that he was working with a particular care and was honest with himself about the reason for the particular care. He delivered the analysis Thursday afternoon rather than Friday. Victoria's assistant told him she had reviewed it in 40 minutes and called it clear. Clear, in the currency of Victoria Carter's professional assessments, was what other people called exceptional. He understood this. He also understood that this was not, actually, the problem. The problem arrived in the form of a conversation with his coworker, Sandra, mid-30s, sharp. One of the few people at Callaway he genuinely liked over sandwiches in the lobby coffee shop on a Wednesday. "You know people are going to make this into something," Sandra said, with the directness of someone who believes in warnings. "I know, it's not fair. But it won't be to you that it's unfair." He looked at her. "You mean her. 14 months of work to build something in an industry that watched for any excuse to take her down a notch. And then there's you, and people will take the most available story, which is the least flattering one. And she'll carry it." He was quiet for a moment. "Does she know that?" Sandra looked at him the way people look when they're deciding how much honesty is useful. "I think she knows it better than you do," she said. He thought about this for 3 days. He turned it over in the specific way. He turned over things that had no comfortable resolution, not avoiding it, not forcing a conclusion, just letting it sit where the pressure could work on it. And on Saturday morning, when he was supposed to take Lily to the apartment on Beacon Hill, had been planning to, had told Lily they would, had watched Lily pack her yellow backpack with the careful selection of a person who has a very specific guest room in mind. He sat at the kitchen table with his coffee going cold and knew that Sandra was right and that this meant something he didn't want it to mean. He texted Lily's grandmother to ask if she could take her for the morning. He drove to the apartment alone. Victoria opened the door. She looked at him, then passed him a brief scan and then back. "Where is she?" "With her grandmother," he said. "I needed to talk to you." She stepped back to let him in. He came inside. He didn't sit. He stood in the kitchen where, 3 weeks ago, he had fixed the stuck drawer, and he said, "I think I should take a step back from whatever this is becoming." "For your sake?" She was very still. "Explain," he explained. He said what Sandra had said, and what he'd thought about it, and how the inequity of the situation worked in only one direction. He said it as clearly as he could because she was someone who deserved clarity. He said that it wasn't about what he wanted, and he knew, in saying this, that he was letting the implication exist, but about what was fair to her. He stopped talking. She looked at him for a long moment. Her face had the stillness she used in presentations, in negotiations, in rooms full of people waiting for her to define the terms, but underneath it, not hidden. Exactly. Just set aside was something else. "You know what I've spent 14 months doing," she said. "Running the company. Anticipating every angle from which someone might find a reason to discount the work," she said. "Every meeting where I have to be twice as right to receive half the credibility. Every time I choose what to reveal and what to protect because the room will use it differently than it would from anyone else." She looked at him directly. "I have been managing that math my entire career. I don't need you to manage it for me." He was quiet. "And I don't need you to decide what's fair to me," she said. "I'd like to be consulted on that." Something in his chest loosened, a thing he hadn't fully known was tight until it wasn't. "What would you say?" he asked. "If you were consulted." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'd say that I moved the crackers to a lower shelf," she said. "I'd say that I have not read a report as carefully as I read yours in a very long time. I'd say," she stopped, looked at the window. "I'd say that the guest room has Lily's name on a piece of paper that I taped to the door last week, and I didn't tell anyone, and I didn't have a professional justification for it." He turned to look down the hallway. On the guest room door, in neat small letters on a piece of printer paper, "Lily's room." He looked at it for a while. "I'm not asking you to make a decision today," Victoria said. "I'm asking you not to make one for both of us." He turned back to her. "Okay," he said. "December in Boston has a particular quality that October doesn't. It's colder, more committed. The cold no longer hinting but declaring. The snow came the first weekend of December, the real kind, the kind that stayed. Lily stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the apartment on Beacon Hill, with her nose almost touching the glass, watching the city go white. "It's like the whole world is being washed," she said. Victoria was standing behind her, 6 feet back, with a cup of tea. She looked at the child at the window, the yellow coat discarded on the couch, the socks mismatched, the absolute unself-conscious attention of a small person watching snow, and something moved through her face that she didn't try to contain. She simply let it pass through her and remain. Ethan was at the kitchen island working through the Meridian follow-up. He had his own key now. This had happened without ceremony. Victoria had handed it to him one afternoon with the same directness she brought to presenting restructuring data, and he had taken it with the same quiet seriousness with which he received information that mattered. He wasn't her employee anymore, technically. He'd been moved 3 weeks prior to an independent consulting arrangement, his work contracted rather than salaried. His analyses brought in on specific projects. The restructuring had made it clean. He had not asked whether she had engineered this, and she had not told him, and this particular piece of unspoken information sat between them in a way he had decided to trust. He was still figuring out what he was. Not just professionally, he had stopped being certain of that label some time ago, but in this apartment, in the specific latitude of 3 people who had arrived here by accident, from a meeting room and an October morning, and a child who packed carefully for a guest room that had her name on the door. He looked up from the desk. Victoria was still watching Lily at the window. He watched Victoria. There was a version of the story, the one he'd told himself for 2 years, in which the shape of his life was fixed, in which he was defined by the absence at its center, in which the hard work and the $46 and the forward motion were the whole vocabulary available to him, in which love was a closed chapter, not because he'd decided it should be, but because the math of it no longer seemed to compute. He had been doing the wrong math. Lily turned from the window. "Can we go out in it?" "When it slows down," Victoria said. "When will that be?" "An hour, maybe." Lily weighed this with the mathematical gravity of the very young. "Okay," she said. She went back to the window. "I'm going to keep watching until then." Ethan stood up, came to the kitchen and stood beside Victoria, not quite touching, the particular close proximity of 2 people who have learned the topography of each other's presence without announcement. "She's going to fall asleep before it slows down," he said quietly. "Probably," Victoria said. "She'll be devastated." "She won't. She'll wake up and we'll take her out in it." Victoria looked at him sideways. "Unless you have somewhere to be." He looked at her. "I don't." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the window and the snow and the city going white. "Good," she said. He thought about that morning in October, in the conference room. The silence after the words had left his mouth. He thought about how the thing he'd been most afraid of, the exposure, the vulnerability, the sheer unmanageable foolishness of those 2 words in that room, had turned out not to be the danger. The danger was in not following them out the door, in talking himself back from the thing they had accidentally opened, in doing the wrong math again and arriving at 0. He didn't say any of this. Some things don't require saying. They only require staying. Lily was still at the window, watching the snow with the patience of a child who has decided to be present for something. The city below was quiet in the particular way cities go quiet under snow, not silent, but softened. The hard edges rounded, the usual noise absorbed into the white. Victoria's hand was on the counter, near his. He didn't move his. She didn't move hers. Outside, the snow kept coming. The 3 of them stayed in the warm light of the apartment, the man who had spoken without thinking on an October morning and been given something he hadn't asked for, the woman who had moved a box of crackers to a lower shelf and put a name on a door and called it internally, by the name she wouldn't say out loud yet, and the small person at the window in mismatched socks who had drawn 3 figures on a piece of printer paper and written US beneath them in careful, confident letters, and who was now leaning against the glass with one hand pressed flat against it, as if to feel the cold of the world she was watching. She didn't fall asleep. An hour later, when the snow had thinned to a drift, Ethan helped her into the yellow coat and wound her scarf around twice, and Victoria put on her own coat, the long one, and they went out into the white. There is no formal record of what happened next. No photograph, no documentation, no professional summary. Just 3 sets of footprints in the snow on a December sidewalk in Boston, walking the same direction, close together, in a pattern that someone watching from a window above might have looked at and thought, "There goes a family." Lily, between them, reached up and took one hand from each. Neither of them said anything. They walked. The block was quiet in the way of snowy Saturday afternoons, a few other figures moving in the white distance. A dog pulling at a leash with holiday enthusiasm, the muffled sound of traffic from the busier streets 2 blocks east. Lily stepped in and out of her own footprints, then in Ethan's, then in Victoria's, comparing sizes with a scientific attention that she narrated under her breath. The cold was clean and bright. Not the wet cold of November, but the dry December cold that makes everything feel more exact. At the corner, they stopped. Ahead, the common was white and open, the trees bare and dark against the sky. "Can we go in?" Lily asked. They went in. The paths were cleared, but the grass on either side was unbroken white, and Lily, who had been, in Ethan's peripheral awareness, building to something for at least half a block, let go of both their hands and ran forward and threw herself down in the snow with her arms out. A snow angel in the making. "Lily, your coat," he started. "She's fine," Victoria said. He looked at her. She was watching Lily, and there was something on her face that was different from anything he'd seen there before. Not guarded, not strategic, not the particular still surface she maintained in professional spaces. Just present. Just a woman standing in the snow, watching a small person make wing shapes with her arms, and finding something in it that she hadn't expected to find. "She's fine," Victoria said again, more quietly. Not at him this time. Almost to herself. He let it go. He let all of it go, the careful calculations, the backward glances at what he was supposed to be and who he was supposed to need. The long practice of keeping himself at a size that fit into the space of fine, we're managing. It's fine. He let his shoulders drop in the cold December air and breathed, and watched his daughter move her arms through the snow. Lily stood up, examined her work. "It needs a face," she announced. "Snow angels don't have faces," Ethan said. "Mine does," she said.